I transmigrated into a novel as the infamous second male lead, Daniel Carter. No one could compare to me when it came to playing the role of a childhood bully. At 5 years old, I snatched Emily Dawson's teddy bear. At 10, I kicked her lunchbox away. At 15, I made her do my homework. Growing up, I held on to my arrogance like a badge of honor, believing Emily to be nothing more than a nuisance. Then, when she finally found love with the male lead, I interfered. I schemed, manipulated, and tried to tear them apart. But karma had its way, and in the end I was thrown into prison, abandoned by everyone. The original Daniel Carter met a tragic fate, dying at the hands of a cellmate, and now, here I am, reliving his life. The throbbing pain in my head tells me it's real. The small, shaking figure of Emily Dawson standing a few feet away, eyes filled with anger, confirms my fears. I glance down and see a rock near my feet. The remnants of a ruined cupcake lay scattered on the ground. Ah, yes, the infamous birthday cake incident. In the novel, this moment marked the beginning of our lifelong animosity. Daniel Carter, the young heir of a wealthy family, had arrogantly boasted about his exclusive birthday cake. Emily, the poor girl from a broken home, had dared to express longing. My past self had sneered, mocking her, and in retaliation she had thrown a rock at me, hitting my forehead. I touched the sore spot and sighed. So it begins. Emily's small hands clenched into fists. She was watching me carefully, as if preparing for me to lash out. I remembered what would have happened next. Daniel, furious, would have lunged at her, snatching away the piece of cake she had, crushing it beneath his feet. He would have spat cruel words at her, setting the stage for years of relentless bullying. But I am not Daniel Carter. At least, not anymore. I bent down and, instead of lashing out, picked up the slightly dirty cupcake. The icing was ruined, but the cake itself seemed edible. I wiped off the dirt, then hesitated before placing it on the small brick wall nearby. Emily blinked, her aggressive stance faltering. She had expected cruelty, not this. "Take it," I muttered, stepping back. I didn't wait for her reaction, turning away quickly and heading home. The moment I closed the door behind me, I let out a long breath. My heart pounded against my ribs. This was it, the first change. The story dictated that Daniel Carter and Emily Dawson must be enemies. Every event, every interaction between them had been one of conflict. But I had no intention of dying in prison. I needed to change the script. The following days were strange. Emily didn't throw rocks at me anymore. But she also didn't approach me. I caught her staring sometimes, like she was trying to decipher what had changed. I ignored her, focusing on blending into my new reality. The Carter family was as wealthy and influential as I remembered from the novel. My parents were distant, busy with their own affairs, leaving me in the care of a strict but kind-hearted housekeeper, Mrs. Hill. Mrs. Hill was the one who noticed my odd behavior first. "Master Daniel," she said one evening as I sat on the patio watching the sunset, "you haven't gone out to tease Miss Dawson lately." I nearly choked on my tea. "What?" I coughed. She smiled knowingly. "Normally you'd be up to some mischief, tossing water balloons over the fence, stealing her school supplies, but lately you've been quiet." I forced a shrug. "I got bored." She hummed, unconvinced. "That's good, I suppose. She has enough hardship without you adding to it." That made me pause. Hardship. Of course. Emily's life had never been easy. Her father was an alcoholic who barely paid attention to her. Her mother had left years ago. She wore second-hand clothes, rarely had proper meals, and was always wary of others. In the novel, Daniel had never considered these things. He had tormented her without a second thought, never realizing the weight she already carried. And I had the power to change that. The next morning, I found a small bundle placed near the fence of my house. Curious, I walked over. Inside, wrapped in a napkin, was a slightly bruised apple. A gift. I turned my head slightly and caught sight of Emily peeking from behind a tree. The moment our eyes met, she vanished like a startled cat. I exhaled through my nose, amused. So this was her way of acknowledging the cupcake incident. I picked up the apple, inspecting it. It wasn't much, but in her world it was a meaningful gesture. A truce, perhaps. A step toward something different. As I took a small bite of the apple, I made my decision. If the world insisted that Daniel Carter must be Emily Dawson's enemy, then I would rewrite that story. No matter what it takes. Memories of my childhood in this world returned in fragments, each piece settling uneasily in my mind. I had been Daniel Carter, the privileged heir of one of the wealthiest families in town. My life had been one of indulgence. Fine clothes, lavish birthday parties, and a house so grand it felt more like a mansion. I had never known hunger, never worried about torn shoes or empty pockets. Emily Dawson had known all of those things. Her life had been the complete opposite of mine. She had grown up in a run-down neighborhood, her house barely standing, its peeling paint and broken windows a stark contrast to my pristine world. Her father was a man who drowned himself in liquor, spending what little money he had on bottles instead of food. Her mother had abandoned her long ago, leaving Emily to fend for herself in a world that had never been kind. I could remember the way she used to look when we were kids. Thin, her clothes always too small or too worn, her shoes barely holding together. Her hair was tangled more often than not, and dirt smudged her cheeks like war paint. But despite everything, her eyes had always burned with something fierce, something defiant. And I had hated that. The memories of our first real fight, the infamous birthday cake incident, came back with painful clarity. It had been my 8th birthday, a grand affair with expensive decorations, a mountain of gifts, and a cake so extravagant it looked like something straight out of a magazine. It had been displayed on a small table in the garden, a symbol of my wealth, my privilege. I had been so proud of it. Emily had been there too, standing just beyond the fence that separated my perfect world from her broken one. She had been watching, eyes locked on the cake, her expression unreadable. I had noticed her, of course. I had always noticed her. What? Never seen a cake this fancy before? I had sneered, my voice dripping with arrogance. Not like you'd ever get one. That had been my first mistake. Her small hands had clenched into fists. I could still see the way her body had tensed, the flash of something sharp in her gaze. And then, without hesitation, she had reached down, picked up a rock, and thrown it. The pain had been sharp, sudden. The impact against my forehead had sent me stumbling back, my hands instinctively clutching the spot where the stone had struck. I had felt warmth, blood trickling down in thin rivulets. For a moment, I had been too stunned to react. Then, rage. My gaze had snapped to Emily, and she had stared back, defiant. She hadn't run. She had stood her ground, her breath coming fast, as if daring me to retaliate. I had stomped on the cake. With all the anger and humiliation boiling inside me, I had raised my foot and crushed the beautiful towering cake into nothing more than a mess of icing and crumbs. There, now no one gets to have it, I had spat, my voice filled with childish venom. That was the moment our rivalry had begun. From that day forward, Emily Dawson had become my favorite target. Every interaction was a battle. I had pulled her hair, stolen her notebooks, tripped her in the hallways. I had gone out of my way to make sure she knew her place, that she understood she didn't belong in my world, and she had never once bowed her head. She had fought back, always. She had shouted at me, thrown things, called me names. She had never given me the satisfaction of seeing her cry. That had only made me more determined to break her. Looking back now, I realized how cruel I had been. How pointless our feud had been. How much of a villain I had truly become. But now, things were different. I was different. Emily Dawson still saw me as her enemy. She still carried years of resentment, years of hatred. But I would change that. Somehow. For the first time since I found myself in this world, I made a conscious effort to avoid Emily Dawson. It wasn't fear that kept me away. At least that's what I told myself. It was strategy. The more I interacted with her, the more I risked repeating the same toxic cycle the original Daniel Carter had fallen into. I couldn't afford that. The novel had already written out my fate, a slow descent into cruelty, an obsession with Emily that would lead to my downfall. If I wanted to survive, I had to break free from the script. That meant keeping my distance, avoiding unnecessary conflict, and above all, ensuring that Emily never saw me as her enemy again. It was easier said than done. Even though I tried to ignore her, I still noticed things. Like how she came to school with bruises she didn't bother explaining. Like how she sat alone during lunch, eating whatever scraps she could afford. Like how some days she wasn't even at school at all. I told myself it wasn't my problem, that I wasn't supposed to care. And then one evening I saw her outside my house. She was crouched near the fence, eyes darting around as if making sure no one was watching. Her clothes were even more tattered than usual, hanging loose on her small frame. She looked thinner than I remembered, her arms frail, her movements careful, as though even the act of breathing took effort. She was hungry. I stood by the window, hidden behind the curtain, watching as she slowly crept toward the trash bins outside. I had always known Emily Dawson was poor. I had mocked her for it, flaunting my privilege in front of her at every opportunity. But seeing her like this, watching her hesitate before reaching toward discarded food, made something tighten in my chest. I turned away before I could think about it too much. For a long moment, I simply stood there, fists clenched at my sides. The easy thing to do, the Daniel Carter thing to do, would be to walk away, to pretend I hadn't seen anything. Instead, I found myself moving. Without fully understanding why, I made my way to the kitchen. Mrs. Hill had prepared dinner earlier, but I wasn't hungry. I grabbed a piece of bread, some cheese, and a small apple from the counter. I hesitated for only a second before stepping outside. Emily didn't see me at first. She was too focused on the trash, her fingers hesitating over a half-eaten sandwich someone had thrown away. I cleared my throat. She froze. For a second, neither of us moved. Then she turned, slowly, her expression a mix of suspicion and defiance. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice sharper than it should have been for someone so exhausted. I didn't answer. Instead, I walked toward the fence, keeping my movements slow, deliberate. I could see the way she tensed, like a stray cat ready to bolt at the slightest provocation. Carefully, I set the bread, cheese, and apple down on the ledge of the fence. Then I stepped back. Emily's eyes flickered to the food, then back to me. "What is this?" she demanded. I shoved my hands into my pockets. "Take it," I said simply. She didn't move. I could see the conflict in her expression. She was hungry, starving, but she didn't trust me. And why would she? In her eyes, I was still Daniel Carter, the boy who tormented her for years. "It's not poisoned," I added dryly, hoping to ease the tension. She didn't laugh. Instead, she narrowed her eyes, watching me for another long moment. Then, as if expecting me to snatch it away at the last second, she grabbed the food and ran. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. She took it. She actually took it. For the first time, I had changed something. It was small, insignificant in the grand scheme of things, but it was a start. I turned back toward the house, telling myself I wouldn't make a habit of this. That this was a one-time thing, nothing more. And yet the next night, I found myself leaving another meal by the fence. I told myself it was a one-time thing, that I had no reason to care, that whatever happened to Emily Dawson wasn't my problem. And yet, the next night, I found myself leaving another meal by the fence. I didn't wait to see if she took it this time. I simply placed it there, wrapped carefully in a napkin, and walked away. The morning after, it was gone. It became a habit, something I did without thinking. A piece of bread here, an extra sandwich there. On particularly cold nights, I left an old scarf I no longer used, tucking it near the fence where she would find it. She never said anything, but I knew she knew. I saw it in the way she glanced at me at school, her eyes narrowed in suspicion instead of outright hatred. The way she hesitated before speaking, as if unsure what game I was playing. The way, little by little, she stopped looking at me like I was the villain in her story. But she didn't trust me. Not yet. And maybe she was right not to. Because I didn't even trust myself. One evening I sat on the patio, staring at the horizon as the sky bled into hues of gold and crimson. A soft breeze rustled the trees, carrying with it the distant laughter of children playing in the streets. It should have been a peaceful moment. Instead, I felt a weight pressing against my chest. I had spent the entire day thinking about Emily Dawson. It was becoming a problem. I barely noticed when Mrs. Hill stepped outside, carrying a tray of tea. She set it down beside me with a practiced ease, then folded her hands neatly in front of her. "You've been quiet lately," she remarked, her voice gentle. I took a sip of tea, trying to ignore the way her eyes studied me, as if peeling back my thoughts layer by layer. "Haven't had much to say," I replied. She hummed, unconvinced. "You also haven't been teasing that Dawson girl lately." I almost choked. Of course she noticed. Mrs. Hill noticed everything. I set my cup down, keeping my expression neutral. "Got bored of it," I said casually. "Didn't seem worth the effort." Mrs. Hill arched an eyebrow. "Is that so?" I nodded. For a moment, she said nothing. Then, with the kind of knowing look only someone who had raised children for years could give, she leaned slightly forward. "Kindness suits you better than cruelty, Master Daniel," she murmured. I stiffened. Kindness. Was that what this was? I wanted to argue, to tell her that I wasn't being kind, that this wasn't about morality or guilt or anything noble, that it was about survival, that I was doing all of this because I had no other choice. But even as the words formed in my mind, I couldn't bring myself to say them. Because the truth was, I didn't know why I kept helping Emily Dawson, and that terrified me. Emily was watching me. Not the way she used to, with barely concealed resentment or quiet defiance. Now, she watched me with hesitation, with curiosity. She was trying to figure me out, the same way I was trying to figure out myself. One afternoon, as I passed her in the hallway at school, I caught a glimpse of something that made me pause. She was wearing the scarf I had left for her. It was subtle, tucked neatly around her neck, the fabric worn but warm. She saw me looking and immediately turned away, pulling the scarf tighter as if to shield herself, as if afraid that acknowledging it would somehow shatter whatever fragile truce had formed between us. I didn't say anything. Neither did she. But for the first time, I thought, maybe I had changed something. Maybe, just maybe, the story didn't have to end the way it was written. For years, I had lived my life carefully, deliberately. I had rewritten my role in Emily Dawson's story, turning from her tormentor into something else, something that even I couldn't quite define. I had given her space, left behind small offerings of food and warmth, and most importantly, I had stayed out of her way. And then, when it came time to choose a college, I had done the most logical thing possible. I picked a school as far away from Emily as I could. It wasn't fear. At least that's what I told myself. It was simply strategy. The story dictated that Daniel Carter would obsess over Emily Dawson for years, trying to sabotage her happiness out of misplaced jealousy and anger. That path led to ruin, to prison, to death. I had spent too long carefully rewriting my future to risk it all now. So I chose a different university, one far from home, where I could start over, where I could finally leave Emily Dawson behind. At least, that had been the plan. The campus was buzzing with energy on freshman orientation day. Students milled about, wide-eyed and eager, some clutching maps while others chattered excitedly about dorm assignments and class schedules. I was walking through the main courtyard, enjoying the anonymity of a place where no one knew me, where no one whispered about Emily Dawson and Daniel Carter's childhood feud. For the first time, I felt something close to relief. And then I heard her voice, sharp, unyielding, familiar. Did you really think you could run away from me, Daniel? I froze. Slowly I turned. And there she was. Emily Dawson. Except she wasn't the same Emily I remembered. The girl standing in front of me wasn't the quiet, wary child who had once glared at me from behind second-hand clothes and clenched fists. She was different now. Confident, bold. Her posture was straight, her eyes sharp, her expression unreadable. Her hair, once tangled and unkempt, was neatly tied back. She no longer looked like someone who carried the weight of the world on her shoulders. She looked like someone who had won. Before I could react, she grabbed my wrist. Her grip was firm, her fingers cool against my skin. I should have pulled away. I should have said something, anything. Instead, I just stared at her, my mind blank. Emily tilted her head, studying me the same way she always had, as if she were trying to unravel a mystery. "You can't get rid of me that easily," she murmured, her voice carrying the ghost of a smirk. And just like that, my carefully rewritten story started to fall apart. I should have known it wouldn't be that easy. Emily Dawson wasn't the kind of person to let the past go so easily, and despite the years that had passed, despite the small, unspoken truce we had reached as children, she still saw me as the same Daniel Carter who had once made her life miserable. And maybe that was fair. Maybe no amount of carefully placed meals or silent gestures could erase the damage I had done. Whatever the case, she didn't trust me, and she made sure I knew it. If I thought I could simply ignore Emily and go about my life on campus, I was sorely mistaken. She was everywhere, not in the way she had been when we were younger, hovering at the edges, keeping her distance. No, this Emily Dawson took up space. She walked through campus with a quiet confidence, her presence undeniable. She had friends, admirers, people who hung on to her words and laughed at her dry humor. And when she looked at me, it was with something close to contempt. The rumor started almost immediately. "Wait, that's Daniel Carter? You mean Emily Dawson's childhood nightmare? That Daniel Carter? Didn't he used to?" I heard the whispers, caught the sideways glances. I ignored them. But Emily? She didn't ignore anything. If I so much as crossed her path, she met me head-on. Every interaction was a battle. Every conversation was a thinly veiled challenge. "Still as arrogant as ever, Carter? Are you really trying to pretend you're some changed man? You don't fool me." I wanted to tell her I wasn't trying to fool anyone, that I didn't expect her to forgive me, didn't even need her to acknowledge me. But I couldn't say that, because the truth was, I did care, and that was dangerous. The shift came during a campus charity event. I hadn't even planned on attending, but my doormate had dragged me along, mumbling something about extra credit and free food. The quad was packed with students, setting up booths, painting banners, and handing out flyers. The air buzzed with conversation, laughter, the occasional burst of music from a nearby speaker. And in the center of it all, Emily. She stood at one of the main booths, her hair pulled into a loose ponytail, her sleeves rolled up as she organized stacks of donation forms. She was focused, determined, completely unaware of the danger heading straight for her. It happened fast. Too fast. A group of students was carrying a large event banner across the quad. One of them tripped, their grip slipping. The pole supporting the banner tipped, falling, fast, straight toward Emily. I moved before I could think. 1 second, I was standing on the sidelines, watching. The next, I was shoving her out of the way. She hit the ground hard, her breath leaving her in a startled gasp. The banner crashed down where she'd been standing just moments before. For a second, there was silence. Then voices. Concerned, shocked, someone calling out for help. I barely heard any of it, because Emily was staring at me. Really staring. Like she was seeing me for the first time. I let out a breath, running a hand through my hair. "You okay?" She blinked, nodded. Her hands curled into fists at her sides, her breathing unsteady. I could see the war in her eyes, the confusion, the doubt. For the first time she hesitated. For the first time, I saw the question in her expression. Was I really still the same Daniel Carter she had grown up hating? Emily Dawson was testing me. I didn't realize it at first. The shift was subtle, so subtle that if I hadn't spent years trying to understand the ways she moved, the ways she thought, I might have missed it. She stopped attacking first. There were no more sharp words thrown at me in passing, no more glares across the lecture hall. Instead, there were questions, not obvious ones, nothing direct, but small things. Didn't think you were the type to volunteer for campus events. You always walk this way? Thought you'd have somewhere better to be. You don't talk much, do you? It wasn't quite friendliness, but it wasn't hostility either. It was something in between. And I didn't know how to feel about it. The real problem wasn't Emily. It was me. Because at some point, somewhere between the sharp edges of our past and the careful, deliberate distance I had tried to maintain, something had changed. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't obligation. It was something worse. Something I didn't want to name. I caught myself watching her too often, noticing small things I had no right to notice. The way she furrowed her brows when she was deep in thought. The way she tapped her fingers against the edge of her notebook when she was restless. The way she looked at me now, like she was trying to understand. I told myself it didn't mean anything. I told myself I was imagining it. And then, one night, I saw her being followed. It was late. Too late for her to be out alone. I had been leaving the library when I saw her walking ahead, earbuds in, her pace steady but unaware. I almost didn't notice the men at first. 3 of them. Hanging back, watching her too closely. The moment I realized, my body moved before my mind could catch up. I followed, not close enough for her to notice, just enough to be there. Emily turned down a side street, cutting through an empty path between buildings. A shortcut, but a dangerous one. The men followed. I clenched my jaw. Damn it. I moved. It happened fast. One of them reached for her, saying something low, something she probably couldn't hear over the music in her ears. She turned, saw them, and I was already there. Back off. My voice was calm, steady, lethal. The men hesitated, looked at me. Something in my expression must have been enough, because after a tense moment, they stepped away, muttering curses under their breath as they disappeared into the night. Emily stared at me. Her breathing was uneven, her hands clenched at her sides. She didn't thank me. She didn't scold me. She just asked, "Why did you help me?" And for the first time, I had no answer. I thought I could pretend nothing had changed. That after that night, after Emily Dawson had stood in front of me and asked me a question I couldn't answer, I could go back to acting as if I didn't care. I was wrong, because other people noticed. "You've been weird lately." I barely looked up from my book. "I have no idea what you're talking about." Liam Cross, my doormate, self-proclaimed relationship expert, and professional pain in my ass, grinned like he had just caught me in a crime. "Oh, come on, Carter. Don't play dumb." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "You're always looking at her." I tensed. "Looking at who?" Liam scoffed. "Emily Dawson. Don't act like you don't know her. Everyone knows your history." I forced myself to stay calm. And, he dragged out, "You care." I exhaled through my nose. "I don't." Liam just smiled wider, as if he had already won. "Right, that's why you nearly murdered 3 guys with your eyes the other night when they got too close to her." I said nothing. Liam laughed. "Man, you are so screwed." And the worst part? I knew he was right. I didn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about it, about her. Had it really happened so gradually? Had I really let myself get pulled into something I swore I wouldn't? Did I, like Emily Dawson? I tried to push the thought away, but it clung to me like a ghost, refusing to let go. I should have been more careful. I should have watched my words. But that night, under the glow of the streetlights with the autumn air crisp around us, I let my guard slip. Emily had been standing beside me, arms crossed, the usual tension between us replaced by something lighter. For the first time, she wasn't looking at me like I was her worst mistake. For the first time, we talked, really talked. And then, somehow, the conversation shifted. She had mentioned the past, casually, as if testing the waters. I don't know what made me say it. Maybe it was the way she had stopped waiting for me to be cruel. Maybe it was the way I had stopped trying to keep my distance. Or maybe I just wanted her to know. I was the one who left the food for you, I said. The words fell between us, heavy, irreversible. Emily froze. For a moment she didn't react, and then, slowly, too slowly, she turned to look at me. What? Her voice was quiet, sharp. I exhaled. Back then, when we were kids, the food, the clothes, it was me. I don't know what I expected. Shock? Gratitude? I got neither. Instead, I watched as something dark flickered across her face, something raw, something furious. Her hands clenched into fists at her sides. You pitied me? No, I said quickly, but it was too late. Emily stepped back. You think that changes anything? Her voice was sharp, edged with something almost like betrayal. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. Because the truth was, I didn't know if it changed anything at all. I should have seen it coming. The moment the words left my mouth, the second I let the truth slip, I should have known Emily Dawson would not take it lightly. But knowing something and preparing for it were two different things, and I was not prepared for the way she looked at me. Like I had betrayed her. Like I had taken whatever fragile understanding we had built and shattered it. You think that changes anything? She repeated, her voice sharp, almost breathless. I shook my head. That's not what Because it doesn't. She stepped back. It was subtle, just a shift of weight, but it felt like miles. I don't need your guilt, Daniel. Her words cut deep. I don't need your charity, and I sure as hell don't need you thinking you can rewrite the past like it never happened. That's not what I'm trying to do. She laughed, but it wasn't real. It was bitter. Hollow. Really? Because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly like that. I clenched my fists at my sides. I was trying to help you. She met my gaze, and for the first time I wished she wouldn't, because there was hurt in her eyes. Not anger, not resentment. Hurt. Yeah, she said softly. Well, I never asked for your help. Silence. The kind that crushes you. And then she turned and walked away. I didn't follow. For the first time since coming into this world, I did exactly what I had sworn I would do. I left her alone. I stopped watching from a distance. I stopped waiting for the moments where our paths would cross. I stopped hoping for something I didn't have a name for. Days passed, then weeks. Emily acted like I didn't exist. And maybe she was right too. Maybe it was better this way. Maybe I had finally done what I should have done all along. But then, one night, she disappeared. The first time I heard her name spoken that day, it wasn't from her. It was from Liam. Hey, did you hear? He tossed his phone on the table, brows furrowed. Some girl got grabbed outside campus last night. People are saying... I didn't hear the rest, because my eyes had already locked onto the screen. Missing Emily Dawson. My heartbeat stopped, and then, just as quickly, it started again. Loud. Fast. Too fast. People were still talking around me. I didn't wait to listen. I was already moving. It wasn't hard to find out who had taken her. The city wasn't safe at night, not for students who walked alone. A group had been targeting vulnerable students, waiting for the right moment, the right girl. Emily had been that girl. I should have been there. I should have followed her. I should have... It didn't matter, because now all that mattered was getting her back. The warehouse was abandoned, or at least it was supposed to be. But inside, there were voices. Men laughing, talking. I moved quietly, carefully, and then I heard her, muffled, weak, but there. Something inside me snapped. I didn't think. I didn't hesitate. I acted. It was over fast, too fast. A blur of fists, of curses, of bodies hitting the ground. And then, silence. I turned. Emily was there. Tied. Gagged. Her eyes were wide when she saw me. Not with fear, with shock. I moved to untie her, my hands shaking more than I wanted to admit. And then, suddenly, she spoke. Why are you here? Her voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. I froze, met her gaze, and realized in that moment that the hate was gone, that somewhere between the anger, the resentment, the years of distance, it had faded. I swallowed hard. And for the first time I had an answer. Because it's you. Emily Dawson didn't speak to me for 3 days. Not because she was angry, not because she hated me, but because she didn't know what to say. And for once, I didn't blame her. What do you say to the person who has been your worst enemy and your unexpected savior all at once? So I waited. And on the 4th day she came to find me. It was late when she knocked on my door. Not hesitant, not timid, just Emily. I opened it without a word. She stood there, arms crossed, studying me the same way she always did when she was trying to figure me out. You look like hell, she said. I almost laughed. Thanks. A beat of silence. Then, why? Not a demand, not an accusation, just a question. Why had I gone after her? Why had I fought for her? Why had I looked at her like she was the only thing that mattered? I could have given her 1,000 answers. Instead, I gave her the only one that was true. I didn't protect you because I feared my fate. I said quietly, I did it because I love you. Silence. And then, she exhaled, something in her gaze softening in a way I had never seen before. I hated you for so long, she murmured. You were my worst nightmare. I swallowed. I know, but then you changed. She looked away for a moment, as if sorting through everything, and when she met my gaze again, I don't think I hate you anymore. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. It wasn't a declaration of love. It wasn't a promise of forever, but it was a start. And after everything, that was enough. The past wasn't erased. It would always be there, woven into both of us, written into the pages of who we were. But we didn't have to live in it. We could rewrite the ending, so we did. We let go of the resentment, the regrets, the battles that had defined us for so long. And for the first time, we weren't enemies. We weren't strangers. We were something else, something new. And this time, the story was ours to write. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe so you don't miss any future content.